Hey everyone, just gonna give a few minutes for people to roll in. Just a reminder, if anyone wants to be able to collect the reward through Galaxy, make sure you're signed into Twitter and joining through a mobile device. So just a limitation that it has. It won't be able to track that you joined if you do it from desktop. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
Hey, coin flip.
Hey, Corey, how are you?
Good. Excited to have you on here.
Excited to be here.
We're giving everyone a couple of minutes to
Okay.
join in. And just another reminder for those new people that just joined, if you're looking to collect Dolomite XP from attending this AMA, please make sure you're doing it from a mobile device. Unfortunately, Galaxy can't track it if you join from desktop, so once again, please join from mobile if you're looking to collect the community XP.
Do I qualify?
I don't see why not, as long as you're on mobile.
There we go. I'm on.
I don't think speakers qualify,
Oh,
unfortunately. So we don't.
Wait,
that's
really?
fair enough. A little more. So, hold on. Does that mean that anybody who asks a question won't qualify?
I think if you go back as a listener and then you're listening for the allotted time, you're fine. But I think if you're a speaker the entire time, it doesn't, like, Galaxy doesn't register you.
That's so strange.
Good to know.
Is that a limitation of Twitter, you
Yeah.
think, or Galaxy?
I don't know. It's on Galaxy's website when you make the credential. So I'm not sure if it's because of Galaxy or the way Twitter sets up their spaces.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange enough you can't do it from desktop, but to add that extra complication is just like, geez.
Yeah,
You got
the
to
lack
be extra special.
that lack of desktop is I've actually found so aggravating. It really feels like something they should be able to solve. I mean, with all 20 engineers they have left.
Yeah, I mean, even basic support,
Agreed.
like for those people that write drafts normally on Twitter, you don't have draft support on desktop. You can only save them on your device if you're not using like a third-party API or something like that. That is.
Yeah.
So it's pretty consistent the poor user experience on desktop across the board. All right, Adam, you want to get started now?
Yeah, I think we could probably kick things off. So, yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. I think this would be a great discussion. Yeah, we've been working with GMX and for a while now, and GLP has been live for we coming up on 3 weeks, Corey.
I think so.
It's pretty exciting. So, yeah, I think we should have some good discussion here. How would you like to kick things off?
So I think CoinFlip might have some specific questions, but maybe just an intro or a primer on what we've done with GMX and how we approached an integration like this. So for those that are not necessarily aware yet, or didn't take the time to read in depth on our documentation or our Medium article, a couple of weeks ago we did what we call a full integration of the GMX ecosystem on Dolomite. So for those that have been longtime GMX users for some time now and have interacted with the different rewards mechanisms that GMX offers, you probably are aware of how complex it is and the level of different instruments at your disposal with the rewards. There's a lot of different moving parts to it and things to wrap your head around. And that has been a point of contention with money market protocols or lending protocols integrating the GLP asset and potentially others because of that complexity it brings to the table. And we're very proud that Dolomite is one of the first, if not the first, lending protocol to really take each individual feature that GMX has to offer with its rewards and be able to pass those along to the end user so they have full control and autonomy over them, as well as take no financial cut from those rewards whatsoever. So that means, to break down the different components, you have the ETH rewards, multiplier points. If you're staking GMX, you get ESGMX rewards as well. And for those that have ESGMX rewards accumulated, you can also vest them into GMX using GLP if you've accumulated with that asset and you do a full account transfer in, or if you accumulated those rewards by staking GMX tokens. What's really neat with it is also that we offer full account transfers into Dolomite using GMX's native function for doing that, which means that for those longtime stakers and users of the protocol, they can take all those rewards they've accumulated. So once again, that's ETH rewards, multiplier points, ESGMX, etc., and transfer those in full to Dolomite, which allows them to then borrow against their collateral and use it in ways that they couldn't access it beforehand, while not skipping a beat with those rewards they've accumulated up until this point.
Great. And how about we even take a second and just let everyone introduce themselves? Do you want to kick us off, Corey?
Sure. So I'm Corey Kaplan. I'm one of the co-founders and creators of Dolomite. We first got started in the crypto industry pretty early on, and longtime builders on various things in an earlier version of Dolomite. Got started in 2015 personally, and got started in the Ethereum ecosystem in 2017, and have been building ever since.
Great. And I know I'm behind the Dolomite account here, but hey, this is Adam. I'm a co-founder with Corey, and I've been in the crypto space since 2013. Been building full time with Corey since 2017, and I've been working with him on everything from projects to companies to hackathons since I don't know, 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Go ahead, Bobo.
Hey guys, I'm Bobo. I handle the growth and business development side of Dolomite. I had the fortune of meeting these two, I think in September of last year, maybe a little earlier than that. And it's just been a whirlwind this last 6 months. Corey and Adam are by far probably the most competent team of devs that I've ever personally talked to. But yeah.
Appreciate the kind words. Brendan, do you want to take it from there?
Yep. So I'm Brandon. I do a lot of the operations sides of things like the Galaxy campaign. So if you guys end up having any questions about that, feel free to hit me up in the Discord and let me know. I've known Corey and Adam for a pretty long time. I think we met in about 2014. They've introduced me to crypto, and I didn't really start taking a deep dive into this space until probably 2 or 3-ish years ago. And really fell in love with this place. Really fell in love with all they know and everything, absorbing as much as I can. These guys are really, really smart dudes and doing some really incredible things with Dolomite.
Cool. And then we're pleased to be joined also by CoinFlip, one of the GMX core contributors. Do I have that title right?
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for having me over here with your community. So core contributor at GMX. The majority of my time I spend on strategy and partnerships, effectively trying to work to build out the ecosystem of partners, builders, protocols who work with GMX, of which we're really thrilled to have Dolomite as one.
Thank you. So with that, I don't want to hog the spotlight and ask a question myself, but what have you seen so far as integrations into the GMX and GLP ecosystem? Obviously, the growth for GMX has been explosive, so there's been a lot of interest in finding ways to build interesting things on top of it, capturing that yield, capturing some of the potential market mechanics that come into play with it, and the overall TVL that GMX has to offer, as well in the liquidity. There's a lot of different things. So if you want to just do a brief introduction there and maybe dive into some of the things that you're seeing and what makes Dolomite, I guess, a bit interesting would be cool.
Yeah, so, well, just for a little bit of history, if people aren't familiar, GLP is the primary liquidity product of GMX, or a spot and perpetual exchange on Arbitrum and Avalanche. Today, the protocol has over, I haven't checked today's number, but it's over 500 million of liquidity in a variety of blue chip crypto assets: ETH, BTC, stable coins, a little bit of Uni, Link, AVAX, and the like. And we've effectively we built this core protocol, which has been sort of a building block. It's both a product that retail traders are utilizing, but also has been integrated deeply within the DeFi community. So we've tried to create a composable product that is interesting for liquidity providers who've been looking to find, I would say, above market. Well, I'm not sure what's the right way to phrase this, but let's say an above market return on a risk adjusted basis. We've found a deep niche of people who are happy to hold volatile crypto assets, also hold stables, and just help to make markets. And I think that's just been it's been a really interesting product, and it's allowed us to continue to work with other protocols, build up this liquidity, and just make and open up trading opportunities. On any given day, GMX tends to have open interests of about 200 to 300 million over the recent last few weeks on a daily basis, and volumes of as much or sometimes higher. Just showing a real capital efficiency in terms of being able to create these liquid markets that have really helped ecosystems like Arbitrum and Avalanche grow. But to your question, and this is a bit of an old number, and I've been using it for months now, but we have over 50 protocols and projects who are integrated into GMX. Now, that might be people who are doing interesting lending products like Dolomite, and we're definitely going to talk more about that. But it might be auto compounders, it might be copy trading, it may be options protocols who utilize the protocol for hedging. So really, it's been a lot of our goal has been how do we help power these other protocols who want to build together. And I guess maybe a little later in this conversation, we can talk about some new products that GMX has coming out and how we really think they're really designed and built with a focus on being able to have others build on top.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, and also GLP, which once again is the liquidity product on GMX, has undergone some pretty extensive history just because of the amount of time that GMX has been deployed on Arbitrum mainnet. I mean, it was deployed on roughly September 1st of 2021, correct?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to deploy literally on the day that the chain opened. So the day that you could deploy contracts, we deployed, and I guess the next day we opened deposits once people could start bridging funds across into the chain. So we've been we've been really lucky to sort of be there from the inception of the chain, to where it's blossomed today with its own DAO and maybe soon its own foundation and really, it's been a very unique experience to be able to help build, this very unique environment. I think a very unique experience, maybe one that we may never get the chance to repeat.
Yeah, definitely could appreciate that. And when looking at the GLP asset and kind of the ways that it's revolutionary, I don't know if there's really been many protocols before that developed a liquidity underwriting tool, because that's really what GLP is, but it doesn't necessarily use a strict algorithm for how it determines like the assets that compose it. It has more of a target weight and it's more of like a auto rebalancing weighted basket of assets, which in and of itself is a bit of a mouthful. But do you think that's a fair assessment, or do you think that maybe I could tweak the language there a bit?
No, I think the way I would look at this is that something like what Uniswap and has done, which really has revolutionized and opened up the DeFi space by allowing effectively that entire price discovery mechanism to happen on chain and use their liquidity pools to provide that price discovery, was revolutionary. But it came with a cost, and it came with a heavy cost, which was that to do so, you effectively had to rely on people arbitraging you in the event that you had assets that were available in multiple other locations. But it could be a very interesting tool for price discovery if there was no other venue where your asset traded. The assets that are within GLP are blue chip assets that have many other venues for price discovery, and we've tried to focus on saying how can we take those assets and how can we instead create deep, liquid, efficient markets. And I think so. One of the things we said is, well, I think let's take a lot of what DeFi has done, which has been really interesting. Take composable vaults. Take community-driven liquidity. I mean, if there's $500 million plus in our GLP products, there is no single party that has more than 3-4% of that liquidity. It is broadly distributed. I think the last time I checked, there was over 80 different people with over $1 million in GLP. Just to sort of give that context, that it is not GLP is not a product for just that one big liquidity provider who decides they want to corner a market. It is actually everybody within this ecosystem putting liquidity and effectively allowing other people to trade. And you're right. I think what made it very unique was it said we will actually fill the role that traditional market makers do outside. A market maker who's efficient in their business within, say, TradFi or even within the crypto space, but not on chain, they don't say, I have to hold exactly 50 BTC and this many dollars and have a 50-50 balance. those forced decisions effectively mean you have to keep giving up value to hold that exactly. Whereas instead, being a little bit more passive, saying that we are creating liquid markets, we know that we will have a little bit more assets, a little less exposure, we believe broadly will deliver a better return. And GLP has managed to do that with relative consistency over the last year and a half.
Yeah, and I think that as the consistency has come into play, there's been more liberties taken with the asset that, from its usefulness and its level of composability in DeFi. So just to give a bit of a history lesson for those that were unaware, GLP started off with some restrictions on it with how it can be transferred, how it can be potentially broken down or unwound if you want to get the component assets back, where there actually was a cooldown in place for those that wanted to exit their position. And I think it was as recently as high as 15 minutes. Was it ever any longer?
Yeah, it was 15 minutes for minting and redeeming, but actually, interestingly, it was as long as, if I can't remember if it was 12 or 25 hours initially for a trade to be closed in our profit because of, again, many issues with oracles and front running, all of which have continued to be worked on over this last 18 months.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to watch the evolution of, the taker side of the equation with those looking to execute trades, and then the maker side of the equation for those looking to underwrite liquidity through GLP. See those optimize over time from the same protocol, iterating and basically upgrading things as they understand the market mechanics and how users actually utilize their product in production with real money at stake. And I think most recently, one of the things that happened that really opened up the DeFi fire hose for integrations was lowering that cooldown for minting and redeeming GLP from 15 minutes down to 0, which means that you can freely enter and exit GLP on a whim whenever you feel or see fit. And that opened the doors for a lot of potential composability in DeFi for products like Dolomite to really take advantage of it because of the level of restriction being lifted.
Absolutely. And I think that, and we definitely would credit that change as being a big part of fueling a lot of our recent growth, because while there's been many protocols that were sort of built with time-based vaults, epochs, and the like that would have been able to utilize it before, it's definitely opened up a whole new set of use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think like one of the ones that we can probably talk about with Dolomite was, of course, opening the doors for using the asset for its intended purpose of accumulating rewards and being able to interact with the GMX ecosystem with your actual balance. But then when those assets are deposited into our proxy vault system, you then get access to virtual liquidity that you can use to borrow against your GLP as collateral. So what does this virtual liquidity concept mean for end users? It means that whether you have GLP itself sitting in this proxy vault, or you choose to use it for vesting ESGMX into GMX, our system recognizes both of those assets, which is GLP or vesting GLP or vested GLP, as a valid GLP asset. So what you choose to do with those assets and how it interacts with the GMX ecosystem is completely separate from the liquidity that you use within Dolomite and how many positions you might open. So for those that are unaware, you can actually open as many isolated borrow positions as you want from the platform. And those isolated borrow positions move collateral to and from your Dolomite balance. And then you can choose to withdraw collateral from the platform as you move collateral freely to your Dolomite balance or not. So there's a lot of different places where you can have this GLP floating around from the internal mechanics or optics of Dolomite, but that's completely separate from the way that you interface with the GMX ecosystem. And when you choose to click on the asset rewards button, for example, on the balances page, you're greeted with a rewards panel that looks eerily similar to the rewards panel that you would have used on GMX itself. And that is like claiming and compounding, staking, or vesting, all of which are supported on Dolomite and offer one-to-one, if not near one-to-one functionality with the GMX interface.
And obviously, I think one of the things we're really excited is with the level of integration and the ability to support staked GMX within the platform. Obviously, one is hopeful that at a certain point that might even be able to open up some additional opportunities within the Dolomite system.
Yeah, so I can say confidently that we're actively working on fleshing out some trading features in the platform that let you go from any asset to any asset permutations. So that would mean like going from ETH to GLP, GLP back to ETH, or even wackier things than that. Like if we list another LP token that's borrowable, you'd be able to trade from one LP token to another one. And all of those would be automated in such a way where you don't need to do a cumbersome process of withdrawing assets and manually going to another site to do it yourself. And as we look to expand our asset offering from GLP to staked GMX and also just vanilla or regular GMX, you'd be able to do the same thing, go from USDC, ETH, or other assets into staked GMX or others. And this will open the doors for a lot of possibilities for pair trading while still accumulating staking rewards and being able to interface with the GMX ecosystem. So we think that the really unique feature that Dolomite's able to offer is kind of like the combination of a couple things at once. When you look at the ability to pair trade different assets or trade between different things very easily, mixed with all these assets having potentially different staking rewards programs, but having full autonomy over them is a really powerful thing because we don't force users into a decision of how they want to work with those assets. And that's a level of control that's sorely needed by not just users, but potentially other protocols that would want to build on top of our system that might have their own call to action or requirements in order to run a certain strategy and maintain a certain posture of what their view of the market might be.
And again, I think it becomes really interesting because as you're able to start adding in LP positions, different types of LP positions from different types of vaults, add in different assets. You really do start creating a situation where you can create relatively hedged positions, have all of that managed by within Dolomite. I mean, you guys get pretty close to being, my prime brokerage account in that scenario. And I think again, it unlocks a lot of really interesting opportunities.
Hey, Corey, well, I think it can help if you go into some of the strategies that people are looking to perform on Dolomite.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple strategies we highlighted with our launch, but I'm happy to dive into them again here for those that are unaware. But there's primarily three strategies that we've identified that are quite different from each other, but offer a wide degree of support for the GLP asset and different opportunities for those users. The first would just be very simply borrowing against your GLP in order to potentially go yield farm elsewhere with those assets if you identify an arbitrage opportunity, or don't want to get stuck just holding GLP and you want to deal with an opportunity cost issue of not being able to participate in the next yield farm or next thing you want to do with those assets. The other would be going leveraged on GLP, where you actually borrow USDC or other component assets of the GLP asset and use that to increase your exposure beyond what would normally be possible. So, for example, if you put up GLP as collateral on Dolomite, you can borrow USDC against it and then take that borrowed USDC and loop it or essentially redeposit into GLP and then recollateralize your position with it. And in doing so, you're increasing your exposure to the yield and price action that the GLP asset nets by moving around and also accumulating fees and rewards. Um, and just to also connect this back to the earlier part of the conversation, this trading feature that we're talking about that we're working on adding will help with easing this process of going from one asset to another in a looped environment to automate your trades or certain actions, as well as increasing the ease of use of the platform overall. So we're really excited about that one and what's going to be possible with it. And then the third one, which is also extremely neutral, and we identified a number of market makers and hedge funds looking to run strategies like this, is going delta neutral on GLP. And delta neutral is it's a hot topic, and it's not necessarily a one size fits all strategy, because the more that you want to actively hedge your GLP exposure to price action or open interest skew or both, the more potential cost you have on the hedging side. So it's a very imperfect equation of how much do you want to hedge while trying to capture as much yield as possible. And typically, the more that you hedge, the more yield that you're going to sacrifice. So what we've seen so far is a number of players looking to create and run delta neutral strategies, and it's not like the typical like yield farming aggregator that you might see on different platforms where they're all basically doing the same strategy. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of room for optimization or for outperforming a competitor under certain market conditions, depending on what your posture looks like. So uh, there's potentially a lot of space for different delta neutral players to run different strategies. And we think that Dolomite is one of the best venues to perform these strategies because we don't force you to take a certain posture. And that's one of the things I hope is abundantly clear from how much I keep mentioning the words control and autonomy that gets passed along to the end user. And the reason why that's so important is because when you look at the GLP asset, um, different price action could lead to different weights being held in it, which could lead to you wanting to rebalance your hedges more or less often. Or if a lot of traders are net long or net short, you might want to account for that in your hedge so that if traders are correct, you don't lose a lot of P&L or profit and loss from those users being correct and siphoning value then away from the GLP asset. So there's a number of different ways and mechanisms that you can look at the market and decide to position yourself for it accordingly. And like I said, it's very imperfect. And that imperfectness leads to Dolomite being a really solid uh, source for hedging this exposure because you're able to carve out the strategy exactly as you'd like to. And we think of Dolomite as more of a blank canvas for its usage because I'm spending a good 5 minutes rambling on and on about how you can run different kinds of delta neutral strategies. But that's just one type of strategy. We already spent some time talking about leverage strategies or looping strategies, depending on how people look at them, or even just borrowing against it to go yield farm elsewhere or do other things with the capital. That flexibility really is key, and it's one of the things that we're extremely proud of with Dolomite, and think that it's going to be a really solid home for any kind of user from simple ones to whales to protocols building on top of us, depending on what their posture is and what a potential integration might look like.
Yeah, I went ahead and shared a pinned tweet from Ichioku.eth. He kind of came up with a different type of strategies you can run. So essentially, you can go from 60 to 150% APR on stables using your GLP. So if you guys want to take a look at that, there's a bunch of different strategies within that thread.
Yeah. So just keep in mind that that thread was posted pretty recently, but the yield slash APR that you accrue from GLP is forward facing, not back facing. So of course, don't take anything for granted. Yields, price action, risk, all these things change over time. So you want to be very cognizant of that whenever trying to run strategies like this. But it's really interesting the different concepts he breaks down and how easy it is to get started with some of these things by using Dolomite.
One other aspect that affects how these strategies are run is the interest rate that is paid. So I don't know, Corey, do you want to go into the interest model that we use on Dolomite and how we use that to incentivize people?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing with Dolomite that we think is pretty unique is we've seen a number of players look to bootstrap their markets by usually introducing some kind of supply side mechanic where if you deposit liquidity in, that you'll earn yield or additional yield beyond what's normally possible on the site or what's being subsidized or what's being paid by organic users. So look at that like as a additional subsidy. So instead, what we're doing with Dolomite is actually flipping that idea on its head of instead using a very aggressive interest rate model, which means that borrowing assets on Dolomite um, at a higher level of utilization results in a lower than usual APR for those users uh, being paid. So on one hand, you could look at it like the users that are supplying different assets like USDC or ETH aren't accumulating enough supply side yield to make it worthwhile for them to deposit. And that's being done at the expense for, once again, borrowers to get access to cheaper rates so that they can run strategies like delta neutral GLP or leverage GLP or taking out an over collateralized zone. They can do it very cheaply and more predictably. But on the flip side of that, what's then possible with those users that deposit those assets is they can also, once again, borrow against them in order to run different strategies as well. So we're looking to introduce different possible strategies that would be possible to be run on Dolomite that are complementary to each other, where the asset supplied for one strategy is the asset borrowed for another. And in doing so, we can hopefully create a virtuous cycle of users depositing more liquidity for both sides of a potential trade, which would result in a larger increase in TVL and usage and liquidity for users to take advantage of this net cheap borrow rate.
One other strategy, I don't know if you had a chance to touch on earlier, was what we do with LP tokens, or will be doing by allowing people to borrow LP tokens. Is that one you think you want to dive into here?
Yeah, I could touch on it briefly because it doesn't directly pertain as much to GMX, but I will use it as a plug to mention like some of the risk parameters and how we approach listing the GLP asset and how it's different from the strategy I'll discuss in a second. We put the GLP asset into what we call risk isolation mode. And it's similar to what you might see on platforms like Aave, how they define their isolation mode, but ours is a little bit more expressive than their version, so the definition doesn't 100% line up. But overall, what this means is, users cannot borrow the GLP asset, which means they can't short the price performance of it or short the yield that generates on the asset. Instead, they're forced to either use it as a supply side asset for borrowing against it, or really that's it. And in terms of isolation mode, we're able to define what assets can and can't be borrowed against it, if any, as well as other potential restrictions or limitations that would go on the asset. Because GLP itself is a pretty well battle tested asset, we didn't feel the need to put it into the strictest tier of isolation mode. As a matter of fact, it's really in the less strict side, which allows you to do more with it. But as we look to expand the asset offerings on Dolomite, we already mentioned, stake GMX and other altcoins. But another possibility is listing LP tokens, like ones that CoinFlip mentioned, like Uniswap V2 style, where they use a completely on-chain mathematical function for deriving its price. And we all are aware of the concept of impermanent loss, probably of depositing assets into those pools, and if the impermanent loss is sufficiently large, you'll essentially lose money from price deviations over time. But what will it be possible with platforms like Dolomite is the ability to actually borrow these LP tokens and short or essentially go long the impermanent loss or short the price performance of it relative to its component assets. So what this would mean is you could actually, for example, borrow the ETHUSD CLP token in the future and take those assets and then instead convert them into GLP, and relatively speaking to each other, potentially put the different performances of them against one another. And these kinds of wacky trades we think will be extremely exciting for users to be able to capture and find efficient ways to run them that wasn't possible beforehand. So we think there's a lot of different permutations of using Dolomite in the future as we list new assets and new network effects emerge for users to find new alpha that wasn't, like I said, possible to execute beforehand in an efficient manner.
Great. Well, I was thinking we might be able to open it up to any questions that people had real soon. But first, I wanted to say, CoinFlip, I believe you had mentioned earlier wanting to get into some of the new products coming out from GMX. Is that something you want to touch on?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, don't have any wonderful branding. I can just simply tell you that it's GMX V2. We've over the last number of months, contributors have been working away on what used to be called synthetic markets, now is from GMX V2. It's really our fresh take on how we tackle one of the problems I mentioned right at the beginning. How do you create deep, liquid, efficient markets on chain? And it's sort of taking a lot of the learnings that came about in building GLP and really seeing how we could work with additional partners. In this case, actually, Chainlink being one of our key partners, for which we were really happy. Just yesterday, we announced a governance proposal for a potential strategic partnership with them to support on V2 with a new set of data feeds, working with risk managers, and just working with feedback that we've been able to receive both from our community, but also a broader set of large traders, liquidity providers, other industry participants of what they would look for in a next generation product. And so we now have a product that we feel can potentially be the base liquidity layer for capital efficient trading, hedging, utilized by vaults, in the ecosystems that we're present in. So, we're really excited because effectively we'll be now working more with a concept that's more akin to pairs, basically meaning that while our setup would not have, let's say, the features of that deterministic result that, say, a Uniswap has that we spoke about earlier, it does now limit the exposure to a clear set of assets. So, for example, say an ETH in a stable, BTC in a stable, while still creating these deep liquid markets that are able to support leverage trading. And do so with a whole new set of market parameters that really allow us to help manage open interest exposure in a way that really does not have as much deviation. Again, creating a more deterministic result, not exactly, but with a lot less deviation. All of which starts to create a set of products that we think will have even broader and deeper use as both provisioning of liquidity and a collateral asset within the ecosystem.
And how do you think that will end up affecting, if at all, integrations like Dolomite?
So the way we see it is that we think there'll be now a range of potential assets that platforms like Dolomite will be able to work with. That could be the various token markets that we are creating. We also think that there's a lot of possibility now for mixing and matching these different assets into different pools and packages of assets that have different risk profiles, all of which can, again, be tuned and handled differently. And this is, again, a response from a lot of feedback we got as to people who want to be able to assess risk. A market that's comprised of AVAX or Solana or trading, in some of these other markets, possibly backed with those assets, maybe not even backed with those assets. It has a very different profile compared to, say, an ETH market backed only by ETH. By being able to sort of separate out these assets, I think we're going to be able to allow protocols who want to integrate our liquidity positions to be able to do so, and do so with more granular control. You may choose to, for example, allow more leverage on in terms of borrowing or utilization as collateral of the ETH USDC market versus, for example, as I said, let's say a Solana USD market, but that's backed by ETH and USDC or BTC and USDC, which has a slightly different profile. It may have some very interesting earning properties, but it just may be that you as a platform will be able to differentiate and look at its risk in isolation and better be able to decide if it's an asset that fits in your platform. So it definitely makes it a lot easier for risk managers, especially lending protocols, to be able to make these evaluations.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate the aspects of risk that come into play with being able to make these finer grained decisions, because one of the things that we've learned and we've seen from the community feedback as well as usage of GLP is it restricts the GLP asset, because it becomes a basket of a variety of different instruments, different assets, results in some degree of limitation with what you can do with GLP, because you can't introduce certain altcoins or positions in there that really muddy the waters in terms of how you assess risk for it. So it seems like the V2 launch will be able to better assess that, so we can, as market underwriters, or in this case takers, can interact with the liquidity in a safer manner, and then liquidity underwriters have a better mechanism for assessing the risk of underwriting that specific market that might be too tough to represent using just the good old GLP asset from GMX V1. So one of the things that you mentioned, though, was potentially assets like Solana, which I'm aware of is not a ERC20 token. Of course, it's its own native coin in the Solana ecosystem, and I don't think there are any native ERC20 wrappers, or at least not any that are liquid on Ethereum/Arbitrum. So what does it look like to underwrite liquidity for an asset like that on GMX V2?
So there's two different ways that we may approach this, and we'll just use Solana since that's the one that I mentioned and you've mentioned. One possibility is working, which we're having conversations right now with large bridges in terms of being able to identify and bring liquid supply as much as possible in a wrap format into the ecosystems we're present in, if we think that that's actually maybe the most appropriate implementation for that market and can be done with scale. Solana, as an example, there's a very strong relationship with Wormhole. They tend to be the best bridge for that. That could be a possible example of one of the conversations I could say that we've been having. But the other option is for us to build that market using, if I were to take the example that is used in a lot of other sort of synthetic asset platforms, synthetic market platforms, a lot of times they would just simply work with a single collateral, a DAI or a USDC or something that backs that market and supports liquidity providers. Part of the innovation that we've tried to do is say that we can probably deal with the tail risk of these markets a little bit better by adding two assets into the mix. So for example, even though we're dealing with Solana, which does have trading characteristics that may be distinct from, say, ETH, there is still a higher degree of correlation. And we're able to basically put two assets in, say, a stable and an ETH, that could back that market. And the market is able to both trade Solana with the backing of these underlying tokens, you being able to use either of those tokens as collateral, and with mechanisms that deal with what I would say black swan events or tail risk in terms of auto deleveraging and other mechanisms that help to balance out the market and stabilize the market in the event of large market moves. A lot of this is actually inspired by mechanisms that sort of historically some centralized exchanges used to follow. And just try to look at the same approach, but do it within the construct of the DeFi environment, and do it in such a way that liquidity providers are both, potentially taking on some differential risk, but then also being properly compensated based on how the market's structured.
Oh, very cool. I think at this point we could open it up to some questions. Corey, Point Flip, do you have any last things you want to cover before we go to that?
I don't think I have anything in particular I wanted to cover anymore. I just wanted to give the opportunity for the community to answer or ask some questions if they had any. And the questions can be addressed to, I guess, myself, Adam, anyone on the Dolomite team, or CoinFlip as well. Guess people are a little shy.
Well, I guess you guys just did too good of a job covering everything. I'll give everyone just another last opportunity to ask any questions you'd like. Happy to take any questions.
I'm just going to assume they're all on desktops and they can't ask us questions.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
also a fair assessment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, in that case, I think we could probably wrap it up. We definitely have other AMAs coming up. If anyone has any other questions, you could feel free to hop into our Discord. We have a channel even for AMA questions if you want us to be able to answer something in a really full, long form sense on an AMA, or we'll be able to answer you directly on our Discord.
If I might be able to just add one quick point.
Go ahead.
If people haven't already had a chance, in the last few days we've had a number of forum posts related to our V2. Please, if you are present in the GMX ecosystem and haven't looked yet, please do go to gov.gmx.io. We will always love the community to be weighing in, providing their feedback as to how these products are being sort of developed, rolled out, implemented. So look forward to that feedback. And I mean, since we are protocols that are on Arbitrum, please also go to the Arbitrum Foundation and look at their recent new revised AIP proposals related to the foundation and DAO.
Absolutely. I think that's a great addition, and I think people should be going out there and taking a look at that. It sounds like it's going to be a great rollout with GMX V2.
Yeah, and
cool.
Thank you everyone for joining as well. We're excited by the launch of GMX V2 as well, and look forward to potentially any integrations that can come along with it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
we'd like
Thank
to.
you.
So I was gonna say we'd like to thank everyone for coming. Thanks for everyone who came and attended. Make sure to pick up your reward on Galaxy if that's something you're interested in. Also wanted to thank Point Flip for joining us. It's great discussion we were able to have. So thanks for coming. Cool. We'll wrap it up here. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Yeah, have a good one, guys.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody.